Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. I have a brand new guest on. I have reporter Robert J. Hansen on. He is an investigative journalist for the Davis Vanguard and Newsbreak.com. He writes about criminal justice, police, homelessness, politics, and the economy. And we're going to talk about how domestic violence leads to children and mothers becoming seriously injured or killed, and why this is overlooked by the courts. So I welcome you on to Slam the Gavel, Robert. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great this morning. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, to be able to speak to everybody. Thank
Yes,
you.
I'm glad to have you on. You know, do you think this obviously this abuse is being overlooked in the family courts? And what are your thoughts? Because I have said, when we were talking earlier, why, if there is evidence of threats of violence, of murder, why doesn't the judge stop it and call the DA and put the brakes on it and take it to criminal court?
That is something that is alarming that we're discovering here by covering family court cases. In the case of an Orange County woman, Tara Slinger, there was, as you reported, you had Angel Law on, and that recording was played to the judge, and um, they just they typically don't do that, as some judges and other professionals and lawyers have told us. Which is interesting, because if you look at court orders, if they're violated, custody orders, if they're violated, it does say that they can prosecute them for criminal charges on there. If you look at the fine print, that in California counties anyhow.
Mhm.
And I'm based out of Sacramento, California, so that's primarily where my work is.
Mhm.
My knowledge of it is within the state. Um, and so it's really disappointing, because we don't know what happened to Tara, but she did I don't know how she passed away, but she was found dead um, Thanksgiving weekend, just a couple months after this conversation with her ex-husband, where he says to the step to his former mother-in-law, she asked him, when or what would your mother think if she knew you were doing this, to not letting your children see your grandmother. And he said, well, she's dead, and soon you will be too, so it
Mhm.
doesn't effing matter.
Mhm.
And so uh I don't see how that isn't something that, even if it wasn't directed to the district attorney's office, why that wasn't something that alarmed the judge to alter custody arrangements.
Do you think they're lazy, that they just want to get this case out of their courtroom to move on to the next one because their dockets are so full?
That's a compacted question there. So the dockets are full, though, because of them allowing cases to be continuously challenged and represented in the court. So they're ongoing longer than they need to be in the first place. I don't know that laziness really plays a role, though. I think they already have their minds made up on who they feel is best suited to take care of the children, and they can't really be convinced otherwise, because, as we know, a lot of these cases, we see a lot of hearsay evidence, she said, he said stuff. And so at a certain point, um, judges and attorneys might feel that all this stuff are things they're no longer willing to consider, because they feel like they've already seen enough, and that they might have already made rulings that they feel like that's where they're going to stand, and that's it. Nothing really could be, and nothing's going to change their mind about it. But especially in Tara's case and Stillinger's, they're from a wealthy family, or he is, and so um, the money that gets spent on divorce attorneys to continue these cases on and on and on, sending people, typically the mothers, into poverty, or is it can't be overlooked either. And the stress that gets put on them, and these cases are allowed to go on a lot longer than necessary. And I believe there are some judges that, I mean, they have to know what they're doing at a certain point. I just think they, in some cases, have there might there you know there I don't want to come out and say and accuse anything, to be speculative, but there appears to be some type of bias or favoritism to a certain party that's not understandable.
I think, well, a lot of people think all these cases are predetermined even before people get in there. They've already, went to the watering hole and they've all talked about the case and have it all figured out. It's already mapped out and how it's going to play out. And whoever has the most money or whoever is connected to the judge wins.
Or connected to the courts in some way.
Right.
It does appear that way. There's an older case out of Sacramento where a mother she was on a fixed income, and her former husband, I believe, was a nurse with Kaiser. At any rate, he was awarded custody, and then she was ordered to pay $800 of her $1,100 a month in child support, which led her. She's homeless now. I haven't followed up with her myself, but I've been meaning to. I have a lot of stuff in the queue and not a lot of bandwidth to get things done. But that's another story I've been meaning to follow up, because that was over 10 years ago when that ruling was made. And so her children are grown now, and I believe they've, reconnected later. But that's just one case where, there was, again, the whistleblower on that one was a court reporter who even said, and this doesn't even look right. How can you order someone to pay that much of their income to child support? I don't, and that's seems to be, again, with Schillinger case, has attorneys that cost, paying over $100,000 in attorney's fees for him, and has all this money, and they're forcing her out of the house to leave, and then taking her kids away from her. I don't see how they can expect anyone to, psychologically survive something like that, all at the same time, with having to leave your house, not having anywhere to go, and then having to hear those kind of threats like that. It's upsetting. And there's other inconsistencies. Again, this is, it alters by county. So, there's recently I did a story of a woman who in out of Modesto, California, they had shared custody for a few years, and allegedly the father made phone call that she had attempted suicide, and then the cops showed up at her house and forced her into, psychiatric care against her will. When they showed up, her new fiance didn't know what they were talking about, but forced her, made it seem like he couldn't refuse letting them in. And then when they came in, they physically restrained her, took her, and then within a week, shortly, like that same month. Well, before I move on, when they go outside when she's on the gurney and they're putting her in the ambulance, the fiance told me that he saw the father standing there with a smirk on his face. So we don't know if he actually called or not, but like, how is he says his son called him and let him know, but that it doesn't. And then for them to turn around and use that on her to give, an emergency order, giving him full custody, taking away any visitation rights, after has evidence of him being abusive. There's audio recordings of him, physically, attacking or abusing his kids, multiple surveillance videos showing the police being constantly called over to their house, like he's using the police to harass her. And he had even been arrested for domestic violence and burglary a few months before they divorced in 2016. And he was already on probation at that time for auto theft. And none of these things mattered when it came to whether or not she, taking, any custody from him. They had shared custody from there on out. And the case just kept continuing and continuing,
Oh
with
my
the
God.
petition for custody getting refiled, almost year after year, until finally in 2020, it filed for divorce, and the first custody was ordered in 2017, and then it was 2020 where the new petition came out alleging her, and it seems like, he just gets to say this one time, and then that's it. Whereas, she had an attorney for a while that didn't take it, didn't press the issue and present evidence. And yeah, it's so it doesn't, again, I can't really, a lot of these things I can't square up how some judges make these decisions. Again, why was it he was able to just say, oh, well, there's this, so she's a threat to the children because there was alleged attempted suicide? That doesn't seem like it even is true. I don't understand it. It's yeah.
Well, it's so antiquated that he would make a phone call saying she was suicidal. Back in the Victorian days, as we all know, if a man got tired of his wife, he would just put her in a mental institution so he could move on to the next wife. Not to knock men. I don't want to knock men because there are
No,
some good
no,
guys
that
out there.
happened. I believe that happened in this country even early before suffrage, or even during that time, where women with mental people, anybody with mental health that they didn't want to listen to, they just labeled them as someone with some type of psychological disorder, and put them away.
Mhm.
Typically women.
Yeah, and they're still doing it today.
They have different terms for it now, but yeah.
Uh, and these judges don't seem to have the best interest of the kids. Uh, I don't even like that phrase, the best interest. It's mostly the best interest of the pocketbook.
It does seem that way. You bring up best interest of children. When we talk about cases of CPS with lower income people, and those that can't afford high class lawyers and things like that, there seems to be a different concern for the children, putting them in foster care really quickly, versus those who have money that can do this back and forth and cause further trauma on their kids. And something between the two that I've had trouble coming to, and I'm not done. I'm still, I'm still looking into this. How in CPS court you can take their children away from their parents, and then quickly, almost seemingly as fast as you can in some cases, push them through the system and foster care and adopt them out. Knowing that ripping kids away from their parents is probably the most traumatic and damaging thing you can do to a child.
Mhm.
Even if there's some, light drug use there's no actual physical abuse or neglect. That's, leaving children with their parents is paramount. When we get
Mhm.
that, and that's what they argue when in those cases, right?
Mhm.
But so they want to keep the children safe, and they take their kids, and then but then we have these other cases where they are with one of the parents already, but their courts, and there's, with reunification therapists, they will allow the two parents. They said, well, the most important thing in this case is to make sure that both parents both parents are in the child's life,
Mhm.
which doesn't seem to be the concern in the CPS cases. But then all of a sudden, these people who have money and are keep going through the courts, petitioning, then there's a chief concern to make sure both parents have custody when, you know, it doesn't seem like it. And then when they do the reunification, they take the custody from one parent, typically the woman, into the custody of the other one, and just completely reverse. They still just take one of the parents out of their lives, and often with an abusive parent. And even if they're not abusive, that still contradicts their message of what's important for the family and the children. So that's I don't see the judges I don't see them not knowing what they're doing. You know, we do see a lot of the cases are backed up. Like we said, there's a lot of cases that are, and attorneys good attorneys spend a lot of time reviewing these cases, and they can only have so many a month. So I don't see how judges having as many that they have to oversee can even really put much time in considering with a fair amount of thought how these cases should be decided. And yeah.
With sometimes I also think the attorneys are a big problem. Uh, uh, Stoking the flames and keeping it going, and then running continuances to drag these cases out. Um, do you see a lot of women losing custody of their kids, or is it neck to neck with the fathers?
So it seems there's oftentimes, I think women in general, women I think are awarded custody the majority of the time. Maybe not, it's not like 90% or anything. I believe numbers somewhere in the low 70s, I want to say. But when the cases are still ongoing and these custody battles are still going on and on, like you said, with lawyers still want help, submitting motions for custody petitions, and they when there's an allegation of abuse then by the mother, and in a few cases even the father, the children will say it, and they're, instead of investigating or looking into those allegations of abuse, oftentimes then the father will claim parental alienation.
Mhm.
And that's how and once that happens, mothers, not always, I mean, in another case it was the father, in fact, but they just take custody from that mother claiming it parental alienation and give it to the father who was just, there's allegations of abuse that they're just overlooking. That seems to be, I mean, the lawyers have a role in this too. They seem to be in it. Like I said, it's not an accident that, people's that their savings accounts and people run out of money going through divorces like this. I've been meaning to speak to more lawyers about this, and I haven't gotten to that yet. So I don't want to say too much about what I've seen or not out of lawyers. But there are victims, women's nonprofit agency in Santa Clara that seems to, instead of actually help support women in domestic violence, they're operate as a divorce court referral agency, which is frustrating.
Mhm.
Because then these lawyers come in and they get paid all this money, and then nothing happens in their favor. If evidence isn't being presented, things aren't considered like that, then what are the lawyers even doing?
Just, racking up bills. If they're getting paid by this agency, then why not have the case just go on as long as it can? They know they've got an income from this. It was a woman's aid or something.
Um, it's a nonprofit agency that supports women of domestic violence, but then they have lawyers, divorce attorneys that they've referred them to that end up not doing anything for them. And that's about really all. There's more reporting that's going to come out on that, but yeah, it's like I said, it's not an accident that the family court system is a multi-billion-dollar industry for divorce attorneys.
Oh, most definitely. It seems, I'm sure you have noticed this, but in family court, as soon as they get in there, whoever calls out the first accusation of anything, usually mental illness or parental alienation, then they've already won their case.
Unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't. It's just odd how certain accusations or allegations are considered, whereas other evidence and proof and court records, like I said, domestic restraining orders being filed on people, and abuse of, and that's not to mention, not taking children over the age of 14, not taking into consideration what they think or say, because that's also part of it in California.
Mhm.
At the age of 14, a judge is allowed to consider listening to the child's wishes and who they want to be with.
Mhm.
And especially in parental alienation, it it doesn't, it might work for small children, but once adolescents get, once kids get to the age of adolescence, it doesn't seem to do any good except traumatize kids. And we see this with the Langs and these other children in Utah here recently,
Mhm.
where they're being forced reunification, and they seem terrified to have to go with the parent. And even in the Utah, they order reunification for a 16-year-old and his 12-year-old sister.
Mhm.
That then the reunification order got rescinded. They canceled the reunification therapy, but then still had the 90-day no contact order that was to go live with their father, who the 16-year-old says
Mhm.
physically and sexually abuses them.
Mhm.
And they're not being, and the children aren't even being listened to,
Mhm.
which that one is very frustrating because
Mhm.
we all know at the age of 14 or 15, we're pretty headstrong. I
Mhm.
mean, we can, of course, psychological abuse happens where parents do turn their children against the other one.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think that parental alienation is the right term for that,
Mhm.
because of the way parental alienation is misused by abusive and narcissistic parents. When they're accused of abuse, then they allege parental alienation. Well, if and that kind of obfuscates and clouds the actual instances where there is psychological abuse of a parent turning one against the other one. So yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Um, these judges, for instance, a case, a 15-year-old was speaking with a judge sequestered with the, court reporter, typing everything with the attorneys. And
The
he told
mediator. All right. Yeah.
yeah, and he told the judge what he wanted. I saw the transcript. And the judges came out and twisted what this kid said and used it for their own false narrative. So we can't these kids' voices aren't even gonna be heard anyway, unless it's a decent judge. I haven't seen any of those.
They're far and few between, unfortunately, it would seem.
Mhm,
I can't believe every judge behaves like this. I believe there have to be some that are righteous and
mhm,
and just, as their title would suggest.
mhm,
Um, I think that there's just not enough oversight and in not eyes on the court when it comes to family court cases. A lot of them are kept concealed or they're confidential.
mhm,
But in family court proceedings, it's still arguable that they're just as open to the public as a criminal case proceeding,
mhm,
and that there needs to be more people watching and access to the courts to keep judges from doing things that would outrage the public if they knew this was going on.
mhm,
Uh, I don't know that the country has the manpower to make these or to put juries in all these cases. Juries probably would help too, and not leaving it in the hands of these judges if they can't make these decisions.
mhm.
But we have trouble filling criminal juries
Right, right.
as it is, right? So, um, unfortunately, there was a law that would have made judges take domestic violence classes, a training that would help them better identify cases of abuse and domestic violence, which didn't make it through the uh, Judiciary Committee here in the state and California legislature. But I believe that bill is going to be revisited now in this new session. But um, that would have also banned the use of reunification therapy, um, and which would have been in accordance with Caden's law, I believe.
Mhm.
So um, they, yeah, if they can't start to figure it out, something's got to be done here, and I just don't know what. Um, also kind of all nailing down the viability, the credibility of court experts when it comes to whether it be domestic violence experts or these parental these parental alienation or reunification therapists. I I don't see any when in a criminal case they've got court experts that testify to DNA or all this any and and their testimony goes to convict people all often based and a lot of it's supported by these credible experts. And for other experts coming in, experts in air quotes, coming in and attesting to things that aren't totally agreed on or based in scientifically or in the even accepted widely in their profession, being used as expert testimony in court cases seems to be more prevalent than it should be, and it doesn't. Again, it's inconsistent when you compare the two. Um, which is something, again, that's something I've had a hard time. That's something I'm doing everything I can to try to bring to light and eventually, hopefully, make some change on.
I think the disturbing thing is when a guardian ad litem, who is an attorney, obviously, maybe some people might not know, but they are, they will start making psychological decisions and, tell the court, "Well, I have to observe mom or dad with the kid." It's like, you do not even have a PhD or whatever you
You don't have a bachelor's in psychology, let alone
know.
a PhD, right?
So, I
Or
don't
lawyers, attorneys, they're usually public defenders, or in some case, right?
I don't know why we even have Guardian Ad Litems, but I don't know why a judge would even listen to a Guardian Ad Litem say that they have to do some psychological, testing on a parent. This is, very
Yeah,
scary.
what I agree. Why are we taking what a lawyer says and putting that much weight in something regarding mental health and mental wellness? I don't. You would think that would be preserved, like strictly and solely for practicing doctors of psychology. That would be it,
Mhm,
and neutral ones too. I mean, not even with, particularly with reunification therapists. I found they get paid large sums of money, but even court mediators and now court reporters, even they have to pay for court reporters to come in since the COVID. You
mm,
know, um, when parents are on the hook to pay for these outside professionals to come in, and then typically, and especially if one party pays for it, um, I don't see how they could come in and make an objective decision on anything when one party is paying for the other one, even if it ends up getting split later down the line. Um, I think the court bringing in outside opinions that they don't get paid for would go a long way. I mean, for mediators, I think the court should provide more than just one mediator per case if these are ongoing, because then for there only to be one that the court provides to then have to go out and pay another one, how are those mediators going to be impartial,
mhm.
knowing where their income is coming from? Why is it that a therapist that stands to gain tens of thousands of dollars comes in and makes a statement that then totally flips the custody on its does a 180 on the custody, instead of it being an outside professional that has no financial interest in the case to come in and give an evaluation? Maybe they can be compensated by the court instead of the families. you know um it's I always have respect. I always have a lot of I'm always very I have a lot of reservations of people's motives when money's involved.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that there is any nefarious, but when I always pause when I see who's benefiting financially from something. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. If they're gonna hire a psychologist, their insurance company would cover it, most of it.
I think so. I've been told that there's certain. So in the case of reunification therapy, I don't believe that insurance covers that. I've seen. I mean, that's from what I understand that they're not covered. That's not covered by insurance. I could be wrong. But yeah. And if insurance covers it, though, you could come in. You could bring in other family therapists rather than a special, like instead of people from like Family Bridges, who we've have a long history of seeing conduct of and hearing from children that have gone to Family Bridges that have terrible stories after going there. um and Family Bridges operates across the country in their reunification therapy organization. But if there's such a short list of these experts that come in, they should widen that and expand that and allow more therapists that don't seem to have such a friendly connection or such a tight net relationship with the courts to come in and give their opinion.
Mhm, mhm.
again, and then going back and then listening to the children would be a good start too.
Right. And even these judges looking at the evidence, there are judges that of cases I've followed in North Carolina where these judges are not even looking at evidence at all. And they're handing this an infant over to a drug abuser.
Right. A severe drug abuser that neglects their children, right?
Mhm. And even federal court is the same way. They're not looking at people's evidence that they're trying to get some type of justice of what was done to them. They're not even looking at exhibits, evidence, and they're just ruling them irrelevant.
No, it's true. And you mentioned North Carolina. NPR has done some great reporting recently on that, where they've found that parents who didn't completely pay the child support that they were ordered to by the courts, that in of itself was enough to keep their care for the courts to keep their kids in foster care and even adopt them out. Even if the parents had turned their lives around, got off drugs, did everything the court asked them, got jobs, they still, at the end, if they didn't have that child support paid for, would lose custody of their kids and their parental rights to their kids. That in and of itself, which in California, there is a law, it's not binding, but there is a law that got signed this year, or came into effect this year, that discourages county child protective agencies from pursuing child support out of from parents if they'd have to prove that it doesn't interfere with the reunification of children with their parents before they can seek child support from them. We don't know how much effect that'll have. We'll see. And it's like it could go further in not requesting parents who typically, again, we're saying CPS especially, are probably not well off in the first place, ordering them to pay child support to the children that you're keeping them from in the first place.
In fact, I did a story on a fellow, I just had his second interview yesterday, where he had no contact with his kids, was never married to the mother, and something happened with her, and CPS took the kids and put him in foster care, but they said they didn't know where he was, the father. So they didn't even seek out kinship. So what they did was they are charging him with the same whatever she did on him, and he didn't even do it. He didn't even have any contact with these kids.
It's outrageous.
Yes, and they're making him pay child support out of his disability. Typical.
Doesn't sound too dissimilar from other cases. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, of course, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of that money factor, that child support. I just think child support should just go away. The money factor, maybe all this fighting would go away if we didn't have this child support issue.
Perhaps. I mean, in divorces, the financial aspect of the divorce is typically decided well after or well before the custody issue is resolved. Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, if eliminating money out of a lot of things would help a lot of things.
Yeah.
Wouldn't just close family courts. I mean, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But and we do need foster parents. There are cases of abuse that children need to be in a home that cares for them. And foster parents need the support in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, speaking of foster parents, though, in California, we found that I wish I had the figures off the top of my head, that over 50% of the people that are homeless were in foster care and had gone through the CPS foster care system here in California. In Sacramento, on any given night, we've got 10,000 people in Sacramento County that are and are homeless. And we're saying half of those people were failed by the family and foster court system or care system. So, if it's failing, and I believe it's way higher than 50. I just gave a modest estimate because I can't recall it. If foster parents are not actually caring for their children, we see a lot of children bouncing around, different house, then what are the foster parents doing to make the kids need to leave every time? It can't just always be these kids. And of course they're troubled, and they don't want to be there probably in the first place, because a lot of times they probably just want to be with their parents, even if there are not ideal conditions. Again, if we're having kids go from, as soon as they're done with their foster care at the age of 18, then going out to the streets and just thrown out, which I've talked to a lot of homeless people, because I cover homelessness. They say that they were with CPS or they had foster parents, and as soon as they turned 18, they were thrown to the streets with no guidance, with no support, no mentoring, no skills. And then they're expected to go get a job and be productive members of society when they're 18 and homeless. That's not even feasible. That's not close. I mean, it's just not even reasonable. There are success stories that you'll find here and there of people going through the foster care system and then, going on, I guess, to college and getting up on their own feet. But if that's a success story, that shows the brokenness of that system. So I'm not trying to get, I'll digress from the homelessness aspect of it, but we can see how far reaching and connected all these issues are into other issues, right? Which, in the real world, everything's interrelated to some degree. So,
do you think, I mean, I won't keep you all afternoon because I could talk all day.
We could talk about this all day.
All day. This is an all day, marathon. But do you think if family court was abolished and took everything back down to civil court, where perhaps a parent could request a jury when there's false allegations thrown out of an attorney's mouth that isn't thinking?
Maybe not abolished, but definitely reimagined and restructured, maybe torn down and rebuilt. I think you just said something that gave me it kind of struck an idea that, maybe we can't put juries in every case, right? But if a case has gone on for 3 years, say, and we can't resolve anything, and there's still contentious arguments between the parents and they can't seem to get along and share custody, which most parents can, because they want to just get on with it, right?
Right.
If we can't come to some reconciliation after, I'd say, 3 years seems about as long as they need to go. And we've heard cases going on for 6, 7, way longer than that. And after 3 years, even a jury of 6 peers coming in and to evaluate, and then people being able to present a real genuine case and put an end to these and make a decision, make a final decision, and again, if these cases aren't, that would probably happen in maybe 10 to 15% of cases, or the ones that go this far that have, that have parents that seem to be unable, for whatever reasons, to get along. If judges are going to start making decisions that end up leading to people getting killed or hurt because they're left with abusive parents, or they take custody away from loving parents, or just drive people crazy. If they're just going to keep letting divorce attorneys and people file petition after petition, allowing this to stay drug up in the court or hung up in the court, when's it going to end for some people? And at some point, I think I think if there's certain, while these judges do get kind of burnt out, or they're already they're already so inundated and subjected to the case, that their objectivity, by no fault of their own, even might be somewhat compromised. just from seeing it so long and so often, and all this, each side saying so much about the other side, that at this point, again, I think after a few years, we say enough is enough. Let's call in a jury and have them decide it, and let both sides present their case.
Mhm. I mean, anything that could help fix this, and the legal abuse that goes on, and the collusion that goes on, I think, not to kind of change the subject, but if a parent picks an attorney that knows the judge, they've got an in.
Or if an attorney picks, or if a parent picks an attorney that knows a judge, and is going to um is going to go along with whatever the court says against the best interest of their client, then they've picked the wrong one too. And and that's just, there's also, there's cases where that happens too, where these divorce attorneys, they're hired and there's a bunch of money spent on them, but they end up doing nothing for the parents.
Mhm.
So both ones, if they have an in, that in could work both ways, depending on the attorney.
Mhm, mhm. Well,
Yeah,
I if these judges aren't going to listen to 15-year-olds, then, what's the point?
right. I mean, again, and a 15-year-old who's probably gone through this for a few years with their parents, they're probably getting sick of it, having it, sharing custody. I was fortunate. My parents were together most of my life, and uh, we had to go stay with family sometimes, but we always knew our parents loved us and they were always together, so we didn't have to go share between one parent and another parent as children. And so I can only imagine what that does to kids, with their friends. They want to play with their friends this weekend, but then they have to go to their dad's that weekend because it's their dad's weekend. And
Mhm.
the dad didn't do anything wrong, but the kids don't want to go because they'd rather play with their friends. There's nothing, that's an
Mm.
innocent, but that's a situation that's going to create more tension, just intrinsically. And so, um, yeah, it's unfortunately, yeah, I don't know,
I know.
and that it's again, yeah. Now listen to kids. If we can't listen to the kids, then I don't know. I mean, that isn't there a saying that about from the mouths of babes, something of truth. I can't remember what it is,
Yeah,
but
I know what you're
you
saying.
know what I'm trying to recall, right? And so, and we know kids inadvertently say things that are too honest to people sometimes, and we see their parents, oh, like, don't say everything, you know what I mean? And because they don't know
Mhm.
that you're not supposed to just be honest. We learn that. We learn how to lie and deceive as we get older.
Mhm.
But again, I don't think some of these kids, when we see some of these kids that seem genuinely terrified, that's not acting. That's not being coached into acting like that. Um, I wouldn't say. And so, I mean, otherwise they're going to be a tremendous actor when they get older. Some of them, right? When you say, I mean, yeah, and the children have to be listened to first and foremost. And I think that again, certain cases after a certain point, and we're not, maybe only 2 years, but after I'd say 3 years for some reason seems right. After 3 years of ongoing contention, we bring in a small jury to Pierce, and then let it kind of wipe the slate clean and let everybody present a fair case, and then get the lawyers out of it after that point. Get everybody gets out of it, and then that's it. And if the parent, if one side is given full custody, then the other side will have to wait till their children become adults before they can have that same relationship that they want to have with their kids. Because most parents I've talked to, even ones that have been accused of parental alienation, in the best interest of their kids, they've just go along with it. Parents who really think about their kids aren't trying to be confrontational or contentious with the other parent,
Mm.
and they're trying to find every way they can to resolve the situation amicably for themselves and their kids
Mhm.
and their former spouse. And if judges can't do that and can't decipher who's abusive and who's not, then we need to have somebody else come in and do it, and someone who's not paid to do it.
Okay, one last question before you go.
Of course, of course.
Okay, here we go. So,
Sure.
these judges probably should have psychological evals and random drug testing. And if they're too burned out, then they should be pulled off the bench and put them somewhere else and put someone new in there.
That could be. Is that the question? Should they?
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
or statement, maybe they should be doing this.
Um,
Because, you've got judges that I'm sorry, you've got judges
you're
that
fine.
are
No,
like
go ahead.
that they're over 70 for Pete's sake. Go
Right,
golfing, go
right.
sailing, whatever you'd like to do. Why sit on the
Enjoy
bench
your golden
torture
years.
Yes.
Mhm. So, yeah, I get scared of people who drive over the age of 80. Right?
Right.
Honestly, I mean, not to take anybody's rights away from them. And I believe driving is an essential right for economic, upper mobility. But
Mhm.
if judges aren't being psychologically evaluated and don't have random drug tests, I mean, any other jobs, a lot of other jobs are subject to that too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as important as judges, and I would go as far as to say police officers and those who work in prosecutors' offices
Mhm.
and public defenders, they should be subject to random drug screenings and maybe not random psychological evaluations, but maybe if you want to stay on the bench after the age of retirement, maybe you should have a simple evaluation done and just speak to someone, talk to a psychologist about how you're feeling.
Mhm.
What makes you want to continue? Why are you feeling you don't want to retire? Do you have such a passion that wants to keep you practicing and on the bench for this long? And have them try to determine whether there's cases of burnout or whether there's a financial motive to stay involved, or we know a lot of judges go into private judging. I don't know if you know about that, which
Mhm.
is which we won't really, that is that's problematic as well. But
Mhm.
I don't see that we're going to have that would be that's going to be a long road. That's going to be a tall order. Seeing as how in California we can't have judges even not fight an auditor's recommendation of what's needed. There was in California there was an audit of the oversight commission, council or commission for judges here in the state, and there was recommendations made to improve it, and they fought it tooth and nail. I think they're still fighting it. The recommendations. I think there's a committee now that was formed. I think the Center for Judicial Excellence.
Mhm.
Perform the one head by Kathleen Russell. She's helped
Oh, yeah.
staff.
Centers
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Judicial Excellence, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the performance one. That's the oversight. Sorry, I get them mixed up. But anyhow, they're trying. They are forming They're discussing. I think currently what needs to to try to implement the recommendations of the audit. And forgive me, I can't off the top of my head remember everything that was recommended, but I know that they weren't happy about that. And if again the lobbyists came in and the lobbyists for judges and those attorneys came in to kill the legislation that would have required domestic violence training, if that got killed in once it made it through the assembly, got to the Senate, or maybe it's the other way around, but it got to the one of the last final committees and then it just died. If we can't have them take so many hours in those kind of classes, I don't know that we're going to allow them. I don't think we can expect them to want to police themselves even further by agreeing to allow themselves subject to random drug tests and psychological screenings. Though I think that's a great idea. I mean,
they're just not held accountable to anything.
I think, and that's it's a major. I think this is a good, thing to kind of end on, is that
Yeah.
their their absolute immunity seems to shield them from far too much oversight and scrutiny and accountability. Um, and without stronger oversight, and without them being subject to some type of accountability, for having too many, having cases go on for far too long, or making rulings that where they weren't considering everything and making arbitrary decisions or biased decisions. They need to actually not just be disqualified from cases, but there needs to be some actual punitive measures taken against some of them.
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm,
we saw what happened you saw Allen versus Farrow,
mhm.
and we saw what happened with the judges in the different systems up there in New York when it came to Woody Allen and his alleged, child
Mm,
abuse, which, that the daughter came. I mean, now she's an adult, and she's like, yeah, it happened. Like, so I don't.
mhm,
And they made the mother look like she was crazy the whole time,
mhm.
right? I mean, in a nutshell,
Yeah.
because Woody Allen was Woody Allen, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so people don't have to have a big name, don't have to be a football player to get away with domestic violence or child abuse.
Yeah.
They can be just someone like Tara Schillinger's ex-husband, who's just got a lot of money.
Mhm. So sad. So sad. How can people reach you if they have any questions?
So they can reach out to me. My email is Hansen Rob J, HANSEN ROBJ @gmail.com. An email is best. Also, you could find me on social media on most platforms. I'm pretty responsive on all of them: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Um, you can connect with me there. I will say that my bandwidth, though, for new cases is almost depleted. I don't know that I have much, but
Same. Same.
and yeah. So, but feel free to reach out. Honestly, I would like to hear from any lawyers and professionals that are knowledgeable in this and have seen this. Retired CPS workers, people's individual cases. I've seen so many of them now, and that they're helpful. Don't get me wrong, and I still have some others that I'm going to amplify their voice. But we're trying to move on with the investigation into and actually getting other sources deeper within it, systems, to go on the record and talk about what they're seeing. Because without moving it forward, I can highlight all these things, individuals, as much as I want, but if we don't start to have the people within the system and start to share with what they're seeing, and move deeper into it. I have retired judges, and retired divorce attorneys, or ones that got out of the profession because they saw things that they didn't agree with.
Mhm,
Those are the people I want to talk to.
mhm. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and,
Likewise, Marianne, I appreciate
yeah,
it. Thank you.
I'd like to have you back on in the future sometime. So,
Anytime, just, yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. And thank
great.
you for what you do. You
Thank
put a
you.
lot of work into this, and yeah,
You too.
thank you very much.
Well, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here in the future with Robert Hansen and other guests as well. Thank you.
Thank you.